thank you everyone again for attending this panel. I know it's the third day and having all the chairs mostly not empty, it's a good thing. We are going to talk about collaboration in general aviation. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Laila Hareb, and I'm the founder and the group CEO of Alive Group, where we provide growth in the fields of aviation, in the field of medical diagnostic and services, and in cybersecurity awareness and technology. And let me introduce the panel over here. We have Mohammed Al-Husari. I like the title, Mohammed. Co-owner, founder, and executive president. I will steal that one. Of UAS, International Trip Support. And we have on my left Douglas Carr. He is the Senior Vice President of Safety, Security, and Sustainability and International Affairs. That's a long one as well. A National Business Aviation Association. We have Mark Hardman, Chief Executive Officer, RightJet. And we have Trine Breithan, right? Senior Manager, Sustainability, Carbon Markets, and Work Connect Energy. So we heard a lot of subjects and issues in the last 2 days, and we just heard from the regulatory, GCAA, about how they are customizing regulation for general aviation. We heard more topics as well about new business models. Let me read it through. New business models, financial planning, aviation sustainability, rebuilding the business aviation landscape, maintenance, supply chain, business continuity and profitability, technological landscape and cryptocurrencies, online bookings, accessibility, VTOL revolutions as well, and finally the regulatory again. So all of these topics, all of these issues, all of these subjects, if we don't have a good collaboration and good relationship between all the stakeholders, we are not going to grow, we are not going to achieve any objectives in these fields or in these topics. So I wanted to talk about as well, I want to quote actually from the FAA latest report about the general aviation growth. Their report 21 and 41 forecast. The general aviation sector was the least affected by COVID-19 than the airlines. There are many entrants to the high-end business jet segment, as well as new student, private and commercial pilots, where we had a lot of issues before to find, joining the general aviation pilot population. Many are flying piston aircraft out of airports that do not have as many commercial flights due to the pandemic, which makes the long-term outlook for general aviation more promising than before. So, to maintain this sustainable growth, make it sustainable, we need collaboration, especially in the world of aviation. Collaboration is key. So let's talk about collaboration. This is our question right now in financial growth and sustainability. How can we ensure proper collaboration? So my first question to Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Laila. Thank you very much for attending. I think if there's one lesson that we took from the pandemic era is that together as partners we can do much better than on our own. So collaboration definitely is key to our industry success and growth. As you mentioned earlier, according to the reports, the number of high net worth individuals are likely to rise, and therefore our industry is bound to grow. At the same time, there is a shortage of labor, for example. There's shortage of talent that come into the aviation industry. We noticed that our business aviation industry is very vulnerable during the pandemic, and there's really a big, with the great resignation, the quiet quitting, working from home, we realize how important is it to attract new talents to the business aviation industry. So to do that, at UAS, for example, we collaborate with the stakeholders like universities, schools that teaches aviation. I get often asked to speak in schools to aviation students about the aviation industry. There's a lot of stereotypes about aviation industry's jobs being either a pilot or engineer or flight attendant. What I try to do is that to widen the scope and show the young talents that it is much more than that. So again, here it's one way of collaborating with a stakeholder to enrich the aviation industry. Another way is to collaborate with civil aviation and regulators to make sure that we have effective communication that will facilitate the operation of business aviation.
Mohammed, during this period, did you find any new stakeholders coming to this landscape to general aviation?
Yes, definitely. The owner's profile has changed. So previously, prior to the pandemic, the owners of private jets used to be in the range of above 50, 60 years old. Now we see young owners coming into the ownership. So the profile of the business aviation owners has changed. Also, the dynamics that these new owners and the requirement they bring about are totally different than what we know previously.
So again, the question for Mark, but to add on what Mohammed said, there is a growth in the number of stakeholders coming into general aviation. What kind of challenges that you guys are facing with the coming new stakeholders, new customers, and the changes in the dynamics? Mark, for you.
Hi, good afternoon. Speaking from a RightJet perspective, we're in the charter, the sales, the consultancy business, leasing, management supervision. Just looking at the charter side, yes, lots of new entrants, lots of questions. And I think there's sort of a duty of care in terms of information sharing. I won't say education, I like these words, information sharing, to make sure the clientele are fully informed. They're actually using good brokers, good operators, and not just the cheapest aircraft on the market. So I think that's probably one of the challenges, one of the opportunities. Again, obviously, with making sure you've got the right aircraft at the right price, but it's fully mission capable with a quality setup. So the operator, the FBO, the broker, of course, because all of this is part of the collaboration and the client experience.
So yesterday I had a discussion about who is the most significant stakeholder on general aviation, and everyone told me it's the regulator. So do you find opportunities of improvement in that kind of relationship with the regulator?
Speaking as a broker, we're sort of one step away from the regulator itself. It's obviously pretty much sits with the operators, but having experience with ExecuJet and other operators in region, I was very happy to hear the earlier discussion on that subject. But again, look at it at every level. Does it just sit with the regulator? Does it sit with the trade bodies? Does it sit with the operator? I think there's common interest here in providing a customer-centric, safe, and sustainable solution. And I know we're going to talk more about sustainability.
If I could weigh in here, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone, and glad to see all of your faces in the chairs today. As was mentioned, the regulator does remain a very important part of the equation, and we saw that really highlighted during COVID when we looked at just retaining the kinds of training, proficiency, access needs that make aviation as safe as it is get challenged significantly. Getting to training centers, doing proficiency flights, getting your medical satisfied, all of that was put under pressure because we were not meeting face-to-face. There were limitations. And the regulators really, at least in the United States, enabled the industry to continue operating by creating extensions to existing licenses, existing medicals, existing proficiencies in a way that alleviated a lot of the pressure from the industry in retaining the people, the process, the safety levels that we've all become accustomed to, the regulator probably has the biggest day-to-day effect on us as an industry, but let's not kid ourselves that we are probably in more control of our day-to-day success than the regulators are at the end of the day.
So again, I'll ask you a question now about sustainability and sustainability actually and technology. So when we look at sustainability of general aviation, do you find it challenging to maintain sustainability in general aviation while maintaining economic growth and financial growth?
Well, sustainability, and we talked about this on Tuesday with our panel, sustainability can come in many different forms. It is not simply one action or one technology or one capability or one process. It is a holistic approach to understanding where your opportunities lie to reduce your carbon footprint. As we talked about on Tuesday, and you're probably hearing frequently throughout the show, SAF is probably the biggest short-term and medium-term opportunity we have. But let's look at other parts of the equation. How are ground vehicles at the airport being fueled? Is it electric? Is it diesel? What are you doing in terms of your own electricity consumption within your building? How about company travel? How about other recycling opportunities within your business itself? There remain multiple opportunities for sustainability to become a core function of business aviation in a way that adds to the impact of very present capabilities like SAF are going to mean at the end of the day.
When you mentioned the carbon footprint and the empty leg issue with the general aviation, so there's a lot of pressure on general aviation in this regard, right? And you can see that brokers are, we're struggling with finding inventory in business aviation. They have a high demand, especially with the COVID. We've seen the demand grow exponentially. So juggling between the pressure, the economic pressure, and finding the challenge of inventory shortage, how can you think that we can overcome this challenge and maintain the pressure or elevate the pressure on sustainability?
Well, maybe it would be good to start with an operator like Mark who faces this challenge day to day.
I think it's a really, really good question, and I'll go with maybe the routine answer in terms of IT and how we can more effectively sell these empty legs. There's a number of platforms out there. Do they all work successfully? Again, the risk of sort of opening up a whole conversation. No. The reason for that is an empty leg is normally based on a primary leg. The primary leg cancels. What happens to the empty leg? I'm probably going to come up with a slightly lateral take on this. And, how could we as an industry, and again, I'll just put it out there, how could we reduce positioning by 20% tomorrow? And I was thinking about this quite carefully. We know all about traffic rights, and the fact is you can't sell seats, so that's one thing. Maybe the scope with aircraft under 19 seats to look at that. The other one is in terms of the freedoms. Could they be expanded at all to allow not an open skies policy, but more flexibility? Because what we as a broker look at very much is how can we keep the positioning down? Because the positioning, of course, drives the overall price. Clients are very price-centric. Now, of course, we have to combine that with quality. But, again, where is the aircraft? Which aircraft can we use? And if you have more fleet available, rather than bringing in an aircraft from point A to point B to take the client to where they want to go, if there's an aircraft sitting on the ground there, why can't we utilize it? And again, there's a number of restrictions we know. In the commercial world, and I'm talking about the airliners, the freedoms sit there for a reason. But with our business, if you were to look at this very critically and say, right, okay, which aircraft do I have on the ground at this location at the moment? Okay, and there's probably 20% of that fleet you can't use for one reason or another, especially on the sort of domestic or within a region sectors or, a Eurozone. If you could actually utilize those sectors, could you reduce positioning by 20% overnight? I think that would be very interesting. And then again, you know, if you've got an aircraft there and it's now positioning, what could you be doing with that? I love the Fly to Help in the UK, looking after getting cancer patients to hospitals, looking after deprived kids. I'm going off subject a little, but again, there's a lot we could be doing as an industry to utilise those sectors, but maybe there's a bigger picture which actually frees up those sectors that we can use.
If I have a comment here, I think I would go with enlightening the stakeholders about the truth behind, because there's a reputation about our industry as a business aviation being a CO emission intensive industry, which is far from truth. In a recent research, it was found that our industry only responsible for 4% of the aviation total industry emission. And it represents also 0.04% of the global emission by human. So as you can see, the impact is not that big, yet this information is not out there. And we keep hearing that business aviation is an emission-intensive industry.
Actually, it was 3% like 3 years ago, and that is including all the commercial airlines around the world.
Yeah.
So I think general aviation has a very small part of it.
Exactly.
Trini, Mark mentioned 2 points which I want to follow up with you. He talked about technology and how do we utilize technology in order to reduce footprint and enhance sustainability. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me here. It's good to be here. It's a pleasure. So basically, it's a lot of different comments I have on this. Just to the first one on the industry and the impact, because my background, I help a lot of different industries on the sustainability topics, and it's quite interesting to hear that all of these different industries, also business aviation and commercial aviation and shipping and all these different industry segments are pointing out that they only have a small percentage of global emissions. So why should the focus be on them? And I think that's a very interesting kind of discussion because, the governments currently across Europe, US, actually globally, are putting up very, very strong targets towards 2030, environmental targets for 2040, and net zero targets towards 2050. And of course, to achieve all of these targets, then everyone needs to contribute, every single industry. So on the technology side, I think it's very interesting to see that the government play a key role in incentivizing and making the technology feasible and affordable for the industry. But as mentioned, the government will never, all the governments globally will never be able to be aligned on all the different regulatory framework. It will be very challenging. So it's also the market players that needs to drive this, and it's the front leaders. And this is what we're seeing in sustainability, that some of these companies are really taking a strong position, and they want to be the front leader of the technology development and the scaling of the technology. So I think it's a very interesting development.
So just to add, I just wanted to talk about why the aviation is under the spotlight for environment. Yeah. And coming from my position in 12 years with the GCAA, with the Civil Aviation Authority, as a lead negotiator in the environmental aspects, we have to understand that ICAO, or the International Civil Aviation Organization, is the most active body under the United Nations. And the aviation is connected. It is not like any other field. So since the ICAO is very active in all fields, they were very active also in the environment aspect. And because of Chicago Convention, that all the states had signed legally, and they are binded by the international law for aviation, and then you can implement environmental policies on aviation better than any other field. So from political point of view, not from from aviation impact on environment, it's easier to control aviation. And that's actually my personal take since my work as a negotiator. Unfortunately, it is, but I think aviation is very strong, and under the pressure of all the policies and emission schemes that people are trying to, like the European Union, and trying to impose on other countries, I think it's very resilient. Our industry is extremely resilient, and the technologies are extremely modern, and innovation is continuing, improving day after day. So I don't think we will have a problem with that, right? So to conclude, do you have any other point that you want to discuss before concluding? Yes, Trine.
Yes, because of course this session is about collaboration, and from my point of view, sustainability, it's so many different market players in this kind of field, and it's very complex because you have kind of all the project owners, you have all the project developers, you have the banks and the investment, the trading houses and so forth. Then you have the third-party verifiers. And then you also have, all the different standards. You have a gold standard, VCS standard, CDM standard, so many different standards. And this is very complicated for all these market players to navigate and collaborate. So to really have strong and long-lasting relationships with strong vendors and make sure that you have that collaboration and network, because it's very difficult as a small market player to be able to understand and connect and have the correct network to assure that you have and receive the best prices. So it's definitely very, very important to have those partnerships. And we in World Fuel and Connect, of course, we have a long tradition of doing these types of collaborations and partnerships. And one example is the Air Elite program. And we have handlers, and Harrods Aviation is one example. Another one, we are doing a lot of other partnerships. I don't know if you heard about Avinode, but this is definitely an ongoing relationships, and those types of commitments I think is very important, because it's very difficult to do all of this analysis and market intelligence, so to say, to make sure that you are not in risk of the reputational risk of doing sustainability wrong. And it's very easy to come with these accusations of greenwashing. We have all heard, the word greenwashing. And I think this is a very hot topic that every company needs to be aware of and needs to be able to be strong in kind of the communication and confident in the communication across what you're doing on the sustainability side. And that's very difficult for a small company to do.
Thank you, Trine. Douglas, another question for you. When we talked about technology, what kind of collaboration to ensure that data is transparent for general aviation? It's very important that we have enough data for brokers to utilize, right? Pricing, transparency, availability of inventory. What kind of efforts and collaboration the association is working on?
Well, I think you raise a good point that may need a little bit of a different answer, perhaps. And I I think there's an effort, there is a desire, perhaps in some portions of the industry, to commoditize business aviation. And we know from experience and from our customers that they want a very bespoke service. They need something very individually tailored to their specific mission every time. And that makes commoditization of our industry very, very difficult. The data becomes a very effective tool in helping to find efficiencies within the existing system. Where are the empty legs? Where are the customers coming from? Where are the needs that they're sharing with us, that they're coming to business aviation to satisfy? But I think at the end of the day, our use of our data, not only company by company, business aviation operator by business aviation operator, but within that sharing of information between the regulators as well, our safety performance indicators, our compliance with audits, our just general performance becomes a tool to help satisfy the needs that are out there. At the end of the day, Warren Buffett, who I think is pretty well known around the globe as a U.S. investor, said, how can you see eye to eye if you're not face to face? That is at the core of why business aviation exists and why it continues to succeed. The past 2 years and our struggle through online meetings and drop calls and all the glitches that come from meetings, we've dealt with. That is never going to replace the opportunity to sit face to face with a customer, to transact business, to develop relationships in a way that lasts beyond just a meeting. There's no other way to do that if you're not face to face. When we look at the reality of what the airlines are doing, many of the airlines are contracting the locations they provide service. Airports are seeing reduced service or in some cases losing service altogether. That's an opportunity for our industry to step in and continue building those connectivity bridges to the competitive global marketplace. When we look at where companies are located, their talent, their teams, their infrastructure, they can be anywhere with business aviation and not tied to the limitations that come with scheduled air transport. I think data remains a very important key. It will help lead our sustainability efforts into the future. But I also think that the uniqueness of our market makes creating some sort of homogeneous product very difficult and likely not the desired end state for many of our customers.
Very interesting. So you don't see in the future online bookings, collaborative online bookings for general aviation?
I think there will be components of online booking that will make it easier for the informed customer of what they're going to get. But if we as an industry, I think, have an opportunity to create a better customer as well, to create a more informed customer of what they're getting, why they're buying, what they're buying, what they are actually getting for their investment. And that leads to a better industry for us, I believe. The data, I think, in our industry is so highly prized. It is so highly protected. Sharing it is difficult. When you look at the customers that we deal with, they're not going to want their data shared. We heard yesterday during some of the other panels that even the design work that's done on the interiors of many of these aircraft isn't shared. So the fact that we have customers who have that same kind of perspective on their own data, I think is going to make sharing it difficult. But we can look to trends, we can look to industry leaders, we can look to the customer base, I think broadly, in helping us to define what the future needs are going to be.
Thank you. Looking at the new entrants in the competitors' landscape, and this is a question for Mohammed and Mark, do you think collaboration is feasible between competitors in future? And going back to data transparency and pricing transparency, how can you collaborate with all of the new competitors coming? Or you're still going to work in isolation because of that transparency?
Want to go first?
Anyway.
From my point of view, I think a way to collaborate with a competitor is through association. So I sit on the board of the Middle East Business Aviation Association, and my fellow board members are two of my top competitors. So I think the associations plays a big role in putting competitors together. On the other hand, with every competitor, there's an opportunity for collaboration. So for example, in our company, UAS, we are a trip support company. Sometimes we can look at FBOs or ground service provider as a competitor or as a provider. And sometimes in the cases, the likes of ExecuJet, they become a customer because they provide services, they manage aircraft, which needs our services. So it's a complex relationship. It's not purely competition. So, but again, there's always room for collaborations and sharing data, as Doug explained. It's a little bit sensitive, especially on the customer side, on the VIB side. I know one of the top famous billionaires of the world, very famous, I'm not going to mention name, he sold his aircraft just a few days back just because he doesn't want people to keep following his flights and knowing where he's going. So it's very sensitive topic.
Trina, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add a perspective from the sustainability side. On the new market players, we are seeing a lot of new developments going on. There is a lot of new project developers, and this is very interesting because it makes this market very challenging because it's popping up like new project technologies and new standards, new platforms, and so forth, and that makes it challenging for all the customers and everyone in the market to follow, what is the correct, quality of a project, what is the correct pricing of a project, and how will the pricing develop during the next 3 to 5 years. And then it makes it very difficult when you don't know the fundamentals. It's very challenging then to actually do those investments because you don't know if it will be a good or a bad investment. So these in transparent markets where you don't really have the access to prices makes it very challenging, and this is definitely something we are kind of trying to help with to actually have that transparency, and also for other companies to promote transparency also on the emission side. So basically have a transparent reporting on your emissions. That's a key part of the data and how to be transparent with data.
Thank you. Mark, you want to add something on the competitors' collaboration?
Okay, yeah, this is a really good point in terms of collaboration. Who are your suppliers, who are your customers, who are your competitors? And I think what we find, and we did a little analysis before we came along to the show, there's connections and possibilities at every level. And the way I tend to see things is that they're industry partners, they're business partners, rather than X, Y, or Z. Because as Mohammed touched upon, today's competitor is tomorrow's customer. And this is really a lovely dynamic within our industry, and something I've had to sort of take on board over the years and, I'll be honest, learn. So this is really good. And what we're seeing is, I've long believed in joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and actually something I've learned recently, alliance marketing. So there's really some good opportunities across our industry, and I think there's some exciting times ahead with those sort of projects and collaborations, and you see them all over, and I think we're going to see more of those. During COVID, has that made things stronger? I think we've probably found out as an industry, as companies, who your business partners are, who you can rely upon, and I think that's been actually quite a good experience because during the tough times, I think there's an old saying, you really do find out who your friends are, and there's a lot of good companies and friendly organizations here today.
Yes, Trina.
Yeah, just a small comment on that, because on the COVID situation, I think that was very interesting from a sustainability point of view. Because what we saw in the market was that when COVID hit and the activity was basically gone and the operational activity was much lower, the companies had actually time to focus on other areas. And what we saw was that a lot of companies were using that time very well to look at the short-term, long-term, and also actually the medium-term strategy on the sustainability side. And this was very interesting. Of course, you have the other side of the market where there have been a kind of more wait-and-see approach. And that's, of course, the approach where you are thinking, what is my competitor doing? Are they doing anything? Should I wait for the government to introduce measures which are mandatory? But the companies that chose to spend the COVID years to actually work on the strategy, they were rather asking the questions like, what is the opportunity if I do these kind of measures? What is the possibilities for me? Is it possible for me to increase the revenue by implementing this strategy? So there is a kind of, I think the market is a bit split between those two kind of approaches. And it's very interesting to look at and see this.
Yeah, thank you, Trini. We have 8 minutes. We can take any questions from the attendees. Yes, there's a question there.
Hi there, Dan Holian from Harrods here. So I was wondering if you feel that reducing cabotage as an issue would help utilise aircraft more en route, and would that actually mean less positioning for aircraft?
Sorry, the question again in...
Removal of cabotage.
I think it came to me this morning, I'll be honest with you. I was thinking about this quite a lot, and again, it's a bigger subject. It's far bigger than, this panel, far bigger than I. But, within our industry, if you would look at this just purely from what would you do to reduce emissions tomorrow? And again, I like the idea of, and I think, MEBAA touched upon this about, our image. We talk business aviation. I think social media probably talks about private aviation, the luxury. So we have to manage all of that. But in terms of, restrictions and not being able to utilize something for reason X, Y, or Z, if they were to be reduced or opened, would you be able to use the aircraft more? Logic says absolutely yes. What's the, and again, an open sky policy, again, it's a whole subject in itself. And I understand it within the airlines and the commercial sector. But as a business, what would it allow you to do? It would allow you to generate more profits. It would allow the price for the end user to come down. And, in many a way, and I won't mention certain locations, but it works very, very well. And whilst, we focus very heavily on sustainability, and so we should, we're just a broker, but we have our part to play. So we do carbon offset? The answer is yes. Do we ask the operators to remove any single-use plastics, try and use locally sourced catering? Yes, we do. But what do we get asked most about by the end user? Is it about what you're doing for the environment, or is it about pricing? And anything that, at the end of the day, what are we driven by? We're driven by the end user. And anything that, allows us to utilize our aircraft more, reduce price, and be more environmentally conscious, I think is an absolutely good thing. As I say, it's a bigger topic than the panel today, absolutely. But as an idea, why not float it?
Thank you for the question. I would like to add a little bit to your answer, Mark, since I was the lead negotiator for the air transport agreement for the GCAA. I believe since so many years, we have negotiated the same structure of air transport agreements. The structure of an ATA or air transport agreement did not change for so many years. And I think it's time to transform the freedoms of the sky. I think we need, at least for general aviation, to allow flexibility for general aviation to grow. We are looking at the traffics the same way as we are looking at commercial airlines, and this does not allow market flexibility for general aviation, and actually doesn't help the empty leg issue for general aviation. So I would seek the regulator and anybody who is responsible for the agreements to allow a section for general aviation within the air transport agreement to have more flexibility. And I think we can do that even now with the current structure, but we need to have an open mind, and we need to have open mind from two sides, from state to state. And remember, when you go for an air transport negotiation, you have the commercial airlines. I have never sat on a negotiation table with somebody representing general aviation. I think that has to change. When we discuss air transport agreements, when we negotiate air transport agreements as civil aviation, we need to bring representatives, or we need to do consultation with all the representatives, and not only the big players as Emirates or Etihad. So we need to look at the general aviation aspect. We need to look even at the manufacturers and any other party who has interest in the air transport agreement state to state. So that's something that I think governments need to work on, and I think the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, needs to have it on the agenda. It's not there on the agenda. The latest assembly, they did not had a lot of improvements, I think, on the air transport agreements. But I think if anybody picks this up, I'm putting a call for the International Civil Aviation to redefine air transport agreements for general aviation. Any other question? All right, so if you have any closing remarks, or we're done, I think. Hamad, you're okay?
I think if I want to add something, close to my heart about internal stakeholders, collaborating with internal stakeholders in the industry, who are our own employees. I think we often neglect our own employees as important stakeholders. So with the shortage of supply of laborers and with the war on talent, I think it's very important to look at them and collaborate with them as a key stakeholder by looking after their well-being. I'm always advocating for chief well-being officer to be added to the C-suite in every organization, and I hope to bring this about real soon in the region.
That's a great business for me, actually, for my holistic center. Yes, Douglas.
One final perspective, if I could. A strong industry needs a strong voice. MEBAA is your voice here in the Middle East and North African region. If you're not a member, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at that. With members, MEBAA is able to do more for you. They can be your voice. They can talk to the regulators, start talking about these kinds of air transport agreements and other issues that are core to our industry. MEBAA's booth is just off to the corner over there. Please consider the value of membership with the organization if you're not currently a member.
Thank you. And I think our panel and the whole event actually is part of the efforts of collaboration within the general aviation. I thank everyone. I thank our panelists, and it was a great subject actually in aviation. The growth of aviation is based on collaboration. The aviation industry is connected. It's not like any other industry. And without the collaboration, we would not be here today actually. So thank you very much. Thank you, our panelists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.